Welcome to your Mental Health Matters podcast, a community-minded mental health podcast providing real-life mental health talks supporting parents, educators, and students.
And welcome. This is our 7th episode of Your Mental Health Matters. We have a special guest today, and the conversation we're having today is navigating gender identity and 2SLGBTQ plus conversations. And we will go into what that acronym stands for, because I think that is a big piece of understanding what our big talk about is today. Let's start off by welcoming ourselves and giving our pronouns. My name is Melanie Fraser. I'm the mental health coordinator from Fort McMurray Public School Division, and my pronouns are she and her.
Joel Pucklow, local psychologist here, work with both Catholic and public school divisions. My pronouns are he and him.
Chantel Seymour, I am the district psychologist for the Fort McMurray Catholic School District, and my pronouns are her, she, and her, right? Yes, there we go.
And my name is Kathy Vladica. I teach here at Ecole McTavish High School. My pronouns are she and her. And I run the Gay Straight Alliance here at the school. I also sit on the SOGI, which stands for Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity committee that the public school division has as well.
That's right, thank you.
And I'm a member of Pride YMM.
I was waiting for that, and you're a member of Pride YMM. So you're very busy. You're doing a lot for our community, so we're really grateful that you're joining us today, so thank you.
Thanks.
Joel, go ahead. I know you want to start leading some of this, so please feel free.
Well, it's so good to have you, Kathy. We're so honored to have you, and it's so glad to be able to unpack and just learn just about your journey experiences too, as well as those you serve and support. So just kind of love to dive into a bit of your backstory and just, what your journey's been, if you want to share with our audience as well.
Sure, yeah, no problem. I came out when I was 21 to my best friend as bisexual, and then slowly came out to more and more people in my life, and to my parents, and not to my whole family, actually. I didn't come out to my entire family till I was in my 30s. And then it was actually in running the Gay Straight Alliance here at McTavish that the kids taught me new words and terminology, and I
love that.
Yeah. Totally.
That is fantastic.
We learn a lot from kids these days.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And so one of my students taught me the word pansexual.
Okay.
And when I was thinking, when she was explaining it to me, I was like, that feels more like the right label or the right identity for me. So I now say that I'm a pansexual cisgendered woman.
Thank you. Yeah, and you know what? We will unpack a little bit more of that in a bit, because I think what some of the things that we really would love to hear from you about is your experiences. And as we are talking about some of these different topics, your take on it. Because we are professionals in our own, we are counselors, therapists, and we have that understanding. But there's a lot we don't know. And we're always learning more, and we're trying to figure out more from individuals around us who are living in the community or who are advocating for others in the community. I mean, I'm an ally, and I want to be able to advocate as much as I can. But it's always growing and learning. Right?
And I love the fact that you were able to acknowledge, I'm still learning, and I learn from kids.
Gosh,
and
yes.
I think that's a really important point for today's podcast, is because it becomes one of those conversations where people don't know the questions to ask, and they feel like they need to know everything. But it's about having those conversations, and you learn through conversations, and that's really what we wanted to do with today's podcast, is help people understand that it is about asking questions and connecting, and there are no wrong questions. It's about
really
learning, and we're always learning, and the terminology changes, and kids will teach you.
And I don't think there's wrong questions as long as the point that you're coming from is from a place of respect and wanting to learn.
Love
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Then there are absolutely no wrong questions.
Yes.
That is
to
the
ask
theme,
whatsoever.
is how do you ask and be curious, but in a respectful way, with understanding and not with shame or judgment. Right?
And because while I'm a member of the queer community, I can't speak for every person in the queer community. And trans people's experience is not my lived experience. So
Right.
while I can talk about the kids and the partner I had who was transgender and my friends, that is not my lived experience either. So, and nor am I two-spirited or a gay man, or right, there's a lot of those labels that are not me. So
I love that. Asking it, making sure it comes from a place of wanting to know and learn in a place of respect. And I think because a lot of people do get uncomfortable in these conversations, and we want to make it an open conversation, right? Where people can feel comfortable to ask questions and to learn. I mean, I consider myself a lifelong learner. I love to learn about everything, and having you here today is wonderful because it is an area, although I do recognize that I'm an ally and I support. There are some areas that I'm still wondering about. So you mentioned the terminology cis woman. Can you explain to us what that means? Yeah.
Fantastic.
So cisgendered means that the gender I was assigned at birth, when the doctor looked at my external anatomy, matches the gender that I feel that I truly am. So the prefix cis comes from Latin meaning on the same side of. So someone who is transgender, the prefix trans meaning on the opposite side of, is someone who's in the gender they know who they are in their heart, and who they know themselves to be is opposite the gender they were assigned at birth by the doctor who briefly looked at their external anatomy.
Right.
Okay, well, thank you so much for clarifying that, because it is a term that I've heard used quite often, and it's one of those conversations that I didn't want to bring up.
Right.
So
you don't know, right?
Exactly, and I like what you said. It kind of gives me a little bit of, okay, I can ask some questions knowing that it is respectful and that I'm wanting to learn, and so thanks for that.
Well, and trying I do a lot of training with Pride YMM as well. We do inclusivity training for the safe spaces designation that we give to organizations here in Fort McMurray. That if we can normalize the use of that word, it takes away from the othering that can happen to trans people. So I'm not a normal woman or a biological woman, the way some people will use those terms. I'm a cisgendered woman, and that's just part of my identity, just like there's a bunch of other stuff that's part of my identity.
Yeah.
Right, so.
Can you please tell us what the acronym stands for?
Sure. So the acronym changes over time, just like lots of things do. The acronym we're choosing to use right now is 2SLGBTQIA+. So 2S stands for two-spirited.
Right. And that's recognizing our Indigenous population?
Absolutely. So a two-spirit person is someone who has the spirit of both a man and a woman inside them.
Okay.
So the idea of two spirits.
Right.
It is only a term for Indigenous people. However,
And can a two-spirited person be, and this is me speaking because I don't know, two-spirited, will they identify as something else in the acronym as well, like two-spirited and...
So all of the labels for the queer community are so personal.
Gotcha.
For many people who are two-spirited, as far as I know, again, I'm not a two-spirited person, but I have lots of two-spirited friends. That is often a fairly all-encompassing term.
Okay.
So it includes aspects about their gender as well as their sexual orientation, but not for all of them. So some of them might consider themselves two-spirited and gay.
Right.
The problem with, and maybe not the problem so much, is just with a lot of the terms or all of the terms for sexual orientation, they are based on your gender.
Yes.
So if I am a woman, a cisgendered or transgender woman who likes women, then I'm a lesbian.
Right.
But what if your gender is not male or female,
so
man
you
or woman?
identify as a male, but you're born a female.
Right. So
What would that mean then? Would you be...
So if you had been assigned female at birth, but are a male, you're a trans man. Right. And so if you're a trans man who likes women, you're straight.
You're straight.
If you're a trans man who likes men, you're gay.
See, and that's the hardest part I think that I struggle with, because I do not want to offend anyone. So going back to the acronym, you went as far as 2S.
Right. Sorry. And and so just that. But so that idea of sexual orientation for a two-spirit person can be a hard idea because the gender piece is not one of the binaries. Also because we're imposing basically a colonial set of ideas about gender and sexual orientation on an Indigenous community that did not have those same
Right.
binaries.
Yeah.
Okay, so 2SL stands for lesbian, G stands for gay, I need to do 2SLG, B is bisexual, T is transgender, Q is for questioning or queer.
Queer. Yeah.
I is often used in the acronym, it is for intersex. A is asexual or agender. And then the plus is because there's a whole bunch of other ones still.
Right.
So for example, mine, pansexual, would just be part of the plus.
Plus, because you don't have a letter for yours.
Well, there's a much longer acronym
So
that has
there
P's
is.
and A's and all the others, but it's
Gotcha.
very long. And so
Right.
to just simplify things, we have just used a plus for a bunch of the
Right.
identities.
Well, thank you for that. Can we go into a little bit of conversation with you about your own personal experience with regards to in a school system, growing up, knowing what you wanted, how you wanted to be addressed and respected by your peers, by your family, and then twisting it and turning it about thinking about how, as an adult, as an educator, what you're doing for the children.
Sure. So growing up in a heteronormative, cis normative culture, in high school, I did not acknowledge or recognize that part about myself. I had a really close, in my head at the time, she was a super close friend of mine. I had a really strong connection with her. And it wasn't until I was in my 20s that, looking back, I was like, oh no, that wasn't just, I was in love with this girl. That wasn't just, just having a really close friend. But when you grow up surrounded in general by cisgendered straight people, that's, you just kind of, the only messaging you're ever receiving really is that that's the only way to be.
Right. So that became your norm, your new norm. You adapted because that's what the expectation.
Well, and just that's what I thought I was supposed to be. I knew I was a tomboy. My hair was cut short when I was young, and I kept it short. I played sports like rugby in high school. I hated dresses. I hated pink. I did not wear jewelry. I didn't wear makeup. I didn't do a lot of the things that are considered normal for girls. So when we have girls that are a little bit more masculine in their activities and dress, that is a label we give to them as tomboy.
Right.
It kind of sounds like you weren't provided an environment to explore. It was like,
right.
here's the box that you fit into,
yeah.
and this is
Yeah.
quote unquote.
Nobody I
normal.
knew at that point in my life was gay. I certainly didn't know the term transgender, didn't know lesbians, gays, bisexuals, not until I went to university.
And you said that you came out when you were
21.
21. So was it the university setting that kind of gave you that experience to explore?
Yeah, meeting other people who were out and open about who they are, and going to a gay bar for the first time with my best friend, and like you said, like exploring this other kind of way of being that I had no clue kind of about, and going, that is much more comfortable.
That felt right.
For me. And I now have what we call here in Fort McMurray, I have a queer family. So I have
love
a
that.
group of individuals who all identify in the 2SLGBTQ community, and it is the most comfortable, really, I ever am,
That is
when I'm
amazing.
surrounded by them.
That is so great to hear. Do you mind if I pause you there
Sure.
for a moment? Because I really feel this is a really good place for us to have this conversation about the impacts on children when they don't have what you just said you have now. Like I actually got goosebumps when you said that, because I thought connection, family,
Yeah.
those are the words we all want. Those are the things we all want.
So something that is unique for queer youth, and I use queer as an umbrella term instead of saying 2SLGBTQ+.
Right.
Is that, so a couple things. One, it's an invisible minority.
Yes.
You cannot tell by looking at somebody if they are gender or sexually orientation diverse. Two, we don't grow up in families who are like us.
Right.
So
Not very
unlike
often.
lots of other minorities, either racial minorities, religious minorities, your family are where you get a lot of support and who you can talk to about the things you are experiencing, the discrimination, the harassment, the differences that you're experiencing. Our families are not always like us. Most of us grow up with cisgendered straight parents and siblings. And for the kids that I work in, their family is often, unfortunately, the cause of the most stress.
Right.
The idea of coming out to their family, whereas for most other minority groups, the family is the source of support.
And that's
And
a
that
very
is
big.
not the case for queer
That's
kids.
a big piece that I feel that we should speak about is the family support and what we do at school divisions to help support our children. And it's not for parents, and I'm a parent, we all know that, and if whatever my child wanted, I would be sure to give, I would try. But sometimes it's coming out of ignorance, not knowing how to handle it.
Yeah.
It's not out of malice, it's not out of not loving your child, but sometimes you just don't know what to do. And sometimes asking the questions, sometimes they're really scary.
Totally.
So some parents really struggle with that.
And
And
that's,
yeah,
I think the
please go
biggest thing we
ahead.
want to focus in on part 2 of this podcast here today is really helping those parents. And we have listeners who often are parents or teachers as well. How do we really be able to connect with our students and support them in their unique needs? Because I love what you said there, Kathy, about family. We all need family. And you see students who don't have that support or family really struggle.
And they're a higher risk population when
They
you
are.
don't have support.
Because of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can think of even heterosexual individuals that work with teenagers as well. If they don't have that family support for whatever reason, they really struggle. So I think that's something that's universal and so important for all of us. So to unpack that in the second segment here will be really exciting. And look forward to your thoughts and feedback as well, Kathy.
Yeah, I think it's really important because that's what our podcast has been about from the beginning, is that connection and that support and how to offer it. And I think just this podcast today really brings it back to just the human needs we have.
Yeah.
We all have that need to connect.
Yes.
We all need support,
Yeah.
and regardless of who we are in our journeys, that stays the same for
So true.
everyone.
Yeah, and that's the underlying message we have to continue to be giving everyone, is that's why these podcasts are really important, is share the message and let's figure out what now. Because we all, like you said, we need to be learners. We need to be moving through this with some impactful way of helping not only our children, but even our parents, because parents are coming out all the time to their children.
Yeah.
And how is a parent addressing that with their child, and how is their child coping with that, right? Like, these are hot topics that we feel that a lot of families need to discuss, but maybe don't know where to begin.
So true.
And it's in the media more and more and more this week. It's all about the trans swimmer in the United States,
Yes.
right? So, and then exactly the messages kids are hearing at home or not hearing at home or whatnot, and how that impacts them, whether they're straight or queer.
And I think that's actually a very important point that you've brought up, is the conversations happening at home may impact a child's ability to actually come out, right? Depending on what's being said around the dinner table or
That's
in
right.
passing. And because if you don't know and you're not asking those questions, the bias there, right, can really impact the comfort level.
And the trajectory of the individual's mental health. You know,
Oh,
you think of the
100%.
higher incidence of anxiety and depression and suicidal ideation, and just feeling so isolated because they feel like no one gets them.
Yeah.
And when they finally do find someone who connects with them, they want to hold on with all might because they finally have that family.
Yeah, chosen family in the queer community is incredibly important because many queer people are rejected by their families,
Right.
which is why the proportion of homeless youth is predominantly queer.
Wow.
Whereas we don't make up the majority, like queer kids don't make up the majority of teenagers,
Right.
but they do make up the majority of homeless youth.
And do you think that's coming from a place of not feeling accepted, or is it probably, but also on the other end, parents' lack of understanding, so they can't find that in between to, because I cannot believe that a parent goes, I'm not going to love you anymore. But I mean, there are some sad cases out there, right? And I do recognize, I'm not that naive to think that it doesn't happen, but some of it can be bridged through understanding and support and compassion.
Some can, yeah.
And hopefully these kind of things will help with that piece. So would there be a message you would say from to parents?
Oh my gosh.
No pressure. No pressure.
Yeah. Your kid is who they have always been.
Yeah.
When they come out to you, they're just honoring you with a little bit more of their authentic self, and they are praying and hoping that you will still love them and accept them the same way you did 30 seconds before they came out to you.
Wow.
That is all that they want, is to know that who they are is okay and that you still love them. Because the coming out process, while I said I came out at 21, that only means that's the first time I ever told somebody that I wasn't straight.
Right.
I come out all of the time.
Right. Right.
All of the time. It is not something we ever get to stop doing. Every new person I meet, every new job I'm in, every new environment I'm in, every new person I come into contact with in a more significant way, it's the question of, can I be who I truly am? Can I tell you this piece of me, or can I just talk about my partner or my girlfriend?
Yeah.
Or do I have to keep my walls up because you are going to not be okay with who I am?
That is beautiful. Like, I just had cold shivers, and I think, again, what you just said hit it so perfectly in, am I able to be who I am? And as a human, that's what we all want.
That's right.
Can I be who I am in your presence?
Yeah.
Right. Oh, I love that.
And that's so many of my queer kids in the Gay Straight Alliance. That is their fear. That's why they're not out at home. Like you said, the conversations that are happening around the dinner table or whatnot, or when you're watching a movie or sports or whatever, and the messaging they're hearing is that there's something not okay.
It's not safe.
With
it's not
being,
okay.
with not being straight or not being cisgendered. And so I can't tell
So
my
keep it in.
parents,
Yeah.
right? And I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, I had a kid ask me, "So, Miss, if I get disowned, what does that mean, or what do I do?" And then I had to figure out, well, what were they referring to? What are you talking about disowning?
Yeah.
And if I get kicked out of my house because I'm feeling like I want to tell my parents because I want to be who I am, but I'm really scared that I'm going to get kicked out.
And
So
I
what
think
do I do?
I know that's another piece of this is we want to give support to students, to children, but we also want to make sure that the parents on the receiving end as well getting support because we do not want to be pushing our own agenda.
No, of course not. No.
Yeah, I want to bring it back to those conversations around the table. And I think it's one of those things where a lot of time people are saying, they're making comments and they're not really understanding the impact of the words that they're using, because there is a lot of derogatory language out there, and you hear kids use it, you hear adults use it. And so how can we address kind of that language? Because the derogatory language has been normalized in a lot of different I want to say environments. And so how then, as an individual, how then can you be mindful of that and be aware of it?
I mean, I would say it's the same for any minority group. If you would speak up if you heard somebody used a racial slur against another person, if you would stand up as a bystander for that, then if you hear somebody using the word tranny, which is a derogatory term for a transgender person, same as the word transvestite. That is also a derogatory term. The phrase that we hear all the time in schools, and it's because kids don't really understand what they're always saying, is "that's so gay."
Yes.
Right? Or the one they were using a few years ago, "no homo."
Yes, that's right. That was a big one.
Both,
how would you address that as an educator? Because you're on the other end.
Yeah. So when you hear those phrases or those words, one thing is you have to address it. You can't let that go.
Right.
One, because any queer kid who's around that hears that.
Right.
Yes.
And if they see the adults in their sphere not doing anything in it about that, what you said is you're not safe. And this is not a safe space for me.
Yeah.
And the armor has to stay up and maybe even a little bit more.
Right.
And we did some training with our staff a couple weeks ago here at McTavish, and that's one of the things I talked about is it's wonderful if you have safe space posters or safe space stickers in your classroom to try to communicate that you're a safe space and a safe person for queer kids. But if you're not standing up and dealing with those things when they're happening in your class,
Right.
it's worse than if you never put up the sticker in the first place.
Of course.
Because we always talk about queer people, we are laser focused on rainbows. You have the tiniest rainbow pin in. I saw it as soon as I walked in the room, Melanie. Laser focused on rainbows.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't matter where or how small the rainbow is, if you've got it up in your room, the kids are going to see it. The queer kids will see it. And the armor might come down a little bit and be like, oh, this is a safe space. I could, maybe actually just be who I am and I don't have to worry or think about it all the time. But if a comment is said by another student and it goes unaddressed, then it's like, oh, no, I should have kept the armor up and now I can't trust you at all. So in terms of how do we address it, I always just ask the kid, what do you mean by that? What are you trying to say with that's so gay? What do you mean no homo? Mm-hmm. Oh, it just means dismiss it, the no homo. Oh, it just means I'm not gay. Well, okay, but what would be wrong? Is that wrong to be gay?
Right. So you address it straight out.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Call it straight out. They're kids.
Yeah. And from a place of curiosity and not judgment.
Oh, yeah,
That's
exactly.
what I love
Shame
about that.
or discipline, stop
Exactly.
that or being mean or whatnot. You're just saying this is the way to address that.
And I've said to the teachers here, I'm not asking you to have stop your lesson and do a 20-minute teachable moment every time it happens. So if you have set established guidelines on behavior and whatnot in your classroom and what are okay words to use and what are not okay, and you hear that phrase, it is okay just to say that's not appropriate language.
Right.
Yeah.
And I would hope that you would follow up with that kid later to have that kind of conversation, because I agree, when we shame people, when we just call them out or we just discipline them,
Right.
that doesn't change behavior,
No, it
because
doesn't.
either they're defensive. Well, my dad says that, or my mom says that, or my grandpa says that. What's wrong? What's wrong with saying that? Or there's no education piece. Why is that wrong to say that?
Right.
So, yeah, and I do. I think you just be straightforward about it and don't hide about it. And the kids in our school also know that I'm out and know a little bit about me. Because I am out, and so I can turn it of well, are you saying something's wrong with me?
Right. And they know you and they like you.
Right.
So then they can relate to that.
Yeah.
And go, oh no.
Exactly.
And then they realize.
And it is something that's often said where they don't understand that what you are saying with that phrase is that it's somehow wrong to be gay.
And I think about the kid in the classroom who is struggling with coming out and seeing an adult stand up.
Oh, yeah.
That connection piece, again, being seen. You don't even really need to be out, but to hear somebody pick up, that in and of itself is support, and it feels like you're being seen. And I think that's a really good point to even parents, right? Is asking those questions without judgment, with curiosity, with the intent to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not rocket science in the sense of, it's not just in name, but in heart. Oh, I love what you said there, Kathy, in terms of it's not the poster you put up, even though that's important. It's actually how you just live that out every day. Yeah. And that golden rule of just being kind or loving to people is so important. As parents, you might not be experts at knowing all the terminology or how to support your child who's just journeying things, but one thing we can be an expert is loving and caring.
That's right.
And just, like you said, all cultures, all different identities, really being mindful of how we're communicating and how we're talking at home is just so important. And if we can treat all others with respect and just be mindful that way, that can go a long way in creating a safe space at home for our children too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And you think about it from the social media standpoint, if you're not too sure what's happening in your child's life, take a walk through their social media. Yeah. You'll get to learn very quickly what's going on in their world, the way they're addressing people, the way they are addressing themselves, what they see, what they say. Taking a look at that and then question them about it, right? That's a good way to bring that conversation to your child if you're not too sure. And, having that open conversation without judgment could be the first step to potentially save them. And I don't mean to be so...
Oh, no, it is. It can
that.
be that real of it could be life-saving.
Yes. The littlest thing for connection is all any child wants.
Mm-hmm.
And as I say that comment, I feel myself getting choked up because it's so simplistic, but oftentimes is missed because of our own fear or our own uncertainty of how to deal with something.
I love what you're saying there, Mel. We don't have to be experts as parents. No. We just have to know how to connect.
We just need to know how to connect.
Yeah.
That's it.
And I think that's a really good segue into life-saving bullying. Mm-hmm. Like, that is a topic that is at the tip in schools, and we all talk about bullying. But what does that mean for this community specifically?
The queer community, or people who are even perceived to be gay, because you don't have to be gay to be bullied for being gay. So a boy who's a little bit more effeminate, or a girl who, doesn't match the mold of what we say these two completely arbitrary boxes are, often get bullied for being perceived as gay, even if they're not. And there are countless stories, unfortunately, of gay kids who have committed suicide because they thought they were alone and nobody cared about them, and that they were dealing with constant harassment by their peers. The suicide rate for queer kids is higher than for any other group of youth.
That is horrible. And we have to do something about that.
Heart-wrenching.
Period.
Yeah.
So on that note, what are some supports for these kids? So those kids that are out there right now, or families that are out there right now, listening to this podcast and saying, this information is great, but where do I turn to? Where do I go now?
So the thing that exists now that did not exist when I was a kid was the internet. And because there are so many supports. Here in Fort McMurray, there is Pride YMM. So we have an Instagram account, we have a Facebook account, we have all the socials. So just Googling that will get you to us. We actually have a support group for caregivers of gender diverse people called Caring Hearts. So if you have kids who are questioning or who have come out to you as being gender diverse, there is actually a support group here in Fort Mac for you.
And that's through Pride, right?
Yeah, that's through Pride YMM.
And oftentimes it's at CMHA,
It
do
is.
you believe?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a great support for parents. We're not only looking at it from the child's perspective, but the parents.
Exactly.
So any parent could.
Any parent or caregiver. So it could be the partner of a trans person. It could be aunt, grandma, anyone who is helping or working with loving a gender diverse person. We also have a support group for trans people.
Right.
So if you are a gender diverse person and are trying to navigate the world in a very unique way, because we live in a cisgendered world, then that is also there for you. But there's helplines. There's actually one specifically, there's a trans helpline now. So it's not just kids help, there's actually one for trans youth. So if you are having a really tough time and you are worried or starting to have those suicidal ideation thoughts, there is support out there in the crisis. But there's Pride here in Fort Mac, and there's so many different social media groups and support groups for kids and adults who are members of the queer community who are looking for people like them, because that is one of the things, like I said, I didn't see it growing up. My GSA kids, my queer kids, they have a very different experience than I did because there is more representation.
Right.
But they still get excited every single time that there's a book, a movie, a TV show, where there's a queer character of any kind, especially if the focus of the story isn't on the fact that they're queer. Right. There's just a queer person in the story.
Love
or
that.
multiple ones. That's really great too.
Yes.
Right? Because that representation piece, if you never see yourself represented anywhere, makes you feel very alone. Absolutely. And we know how damaging isolation can be on mental health,
very
right?
damaging.
And
So go ahead.
No, and so just that piece of when, as queer people, we're generally not growing up in families that are like us.
Yeah.
So that isolation is real.
It's a real thing. Kids. And so as a school, we have that responsibility as schools, divisions, to help support these kids. Yeah. And that's why they have, teachers, like you said, have safe space stickers or posters. Those of you who are listening to the Sue podcast, I'm showing posters right now, just in case you're wondering. But also part of the public division, we have SOGI 123, which Kathy also mentioned about. And that is specifically for Alberta, and we have 6 school divisions currently in this, and it's all about topics to education, networking, all to do with SOGI topics, which is so important, right? And so kids can come up, these are on posters in the public board, and they can scan this, and it goes right to their webpage. And then you're able to actually find out all of the information for this.
What does SOGI stand for?
Sexual orientation, gender identity. So that is something that Kathy is a part of, myself, I'm a part of as well. And we're trying to spread the word. We're trying to get it out there because each school has a SOGI lead. And with the SOGI lead, that means they represent with also maybe another teacher who's maybe part of does the GSA. They put up bulletin boards. We're trying to challenge different conversations, right? Like some topics, did you know, and then have certain words so that the kids can understand some of this language and have it from a better perspective. I love the fact that I hear teachers walking by these bulletin boards and they purposely choose a different way to go to the gym so that they could see the bulletin board. Oh, look at that, right?
Love that.
We're teaching our children for our children to also teach their parents.
Yeah.
That's a big piece of this as well. So we're talking about the support. That is one.
Gay Straight Alliances exist in most of the public schools, high
Catholics.
school
And
and
Catholics,
elementary, and I know the Catholic high schools
Yeah.
both do.
And
in
a
Fort
few of
McMurray.
our elementary
Awesome.
schools as well.
Yeah.
Can you speak to the GSAs for parents
Sure.
and just let them know a little bit about what that is and kind of what happens within it? And yeah, because not everybody knows.
I'm glad you're bringing that up because that is a question parents wonder about.
So GSA stands for Gay Straight Alliance. Sometimes they are called QSAs for Queer Straight Alliance. And what they are is it's a group for kids who either identify as queer or who are straight but are allies and who support their queer friends. Different schools will have maybe different focuses, and the focus can actually change. I've been running the one here in McTavish for over 7 years now, and it really depends on my kids. So some of them want to be advocates, and they want to like make bulletin boards, like Melanie said, and they want to have a pride parade, and they want to go out and into the school and teach about what it means to be queer and to try to build acceptance. Others are just looking for a safe space where they can let the armor down.
So it kind of sounds
Just
like
be themselves for that 45-minute lunch hour with a bunch of other kids who
Sounds beautiful.
are somehow like them
sounds
too.
like it's the GSA is what the person needs. It's individualized. You get out of it what you need.
Yeah.
So one of the counselors here at McTavish did her master's work on the presence of GSAs in schools. And one of the things that she found was that the presence of a GSA reduces bullying in a school, just literally the presence of it, and makes the school feel safer even if the queer kids don't choose to attend the GSA, because there can be a host of reasons why kids won't go. But just knowing that exists in their school helps straight and queer kids in their school.
And it's that
I love
acceptance piece, right? It's just that ability to be able to feel okay within yourself, with everyone around you for a little while.
And that permission to explore that we started this podcast talking about is something that you weren't afforded when you were growing up. That space to just explore who you are and around different people and like-minded people, and I think that's beautiful.
From year to year, it'll change what the kids want to focus on. I know one year it was a lot about labels. They wanted to talk about the labels, and they wanted to, why do we even have to have a label, miss? Good question. Why? Good question. Yeah. A lot of times it's about coming out.
Right.
They either want to talk about coming out, there's worries about coming out, they come out to somebody, and then we have a party. And, and like I said, it's led by them. I am not there to tell them anything or teach them anything or come in with any specific thing. That I'm there literally just to create a safe space for them to be who they are and talk about what they want to talk about with other kids who are like them.
And I think that's important for parents to know, is that there's no agenda.
There isn't.
It's just this space and an environment where kids can be who they are and explore who they are in relation to others.
Well, there's this idea in the media, perpetuated I think a lot sometimes from the States, is that you can teach or unteach people to be gay. And saying the word gay isn't going to make anyone gay. And having a GSA is, I'm not here, I can't teach any kid to be gay. They either are or they're not.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with the words
That's right.
or having a space for them.
In terms of that exploration piece, I know a common question for younger teenagers, even children in upper elementary these days, is around just that exploration of their gender.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of, I don't know what your experiences are as counselors and as teachers as well, there, Kathy, and how we support parents with children who are just kind of wondering, questioning, asking questions, and just seeking to understand that journey for themselves.
Yeah, I think one of the bigger things is listening.
Yeah, definitely.
Listening, right? Like when I get a parent call and they say, my daughter's been saying that they are gay, and it's like, okay, what does gay mean to them? I'll ask them,
Yeah.
and then they'll tell me what they're feeling, and so you'll see that sometimes they are grieving what they do not understand or the life that they thought they would have for their child. And that acceptance sometimes takes a little bit longer. So they're on their own journey along with their
100%.
child's, right? And helping them understand that as long as you're doing the journey together and talking and listening is the biggest piece of that, because the parents oftentimes they just want their child to feel loved.
Yeah.
And they don't understand why this is causing discomfort in their family or whatnot. So I think the biggest thing is seeking understanding, building that connection with your child and learning more about who they are and how they want to be seen in the world, and then traveling together on it. I know that seems so simplistic, but that
It
really is it.
is.
So true.
But that piece you just mentioned is that grieving piece as well, because we all have ideas of what our lives are going to look like. Now, do they ever really form that way?
No.
Chances are no. Let's be honest. But we have this ideal, right? And whether or not people realize it, like that impacts a lot of what we do and how we think. And so I think for parents, having that grace and that compassion with themselves, knowing that it's okay if you're grieving a bit of that. That doesn't mean that you can't still be a part of the journey.
Absolutely.
Like you can have your own emotions and you can have your own journey, and that's why I love that there's a parent and caregiver support, and you can also support
That's right.
your
They can
your
happen
kids' journey.
together.
Yeah.
Well, and some of the things that parents think that they're grieving don't have to be. Like just because your child has come out to you as being a different sexual orientation than you thought, that so they're not straight, doesn't mean those images you had of your child's wedding aren't going to happen.
Right.
Just the person standing across from them might be slightly different than you imagined.
This is
But
true.
the wedding can still happen, and the kids can still happen. The family that you were maybe hoping for might still happen if that's what your child still wants.
Right.
Right? But like, you're right. Our parents all have these ideas for us, and other pieces seem to be easier for our parents to let go of, like, oh, they wanted me to be a doctor and I didn't become a doctor. Oh, well.
Yes.
But gender is something that is so integral to our identity, and it's something that is actually put on us from before birth,
Right.
right? In terms of the way parents do their nurseries and gender
Right.
reveal parties. And
Right.
so that traveling that journey, if you have a gender diverse child, it's not easy. It's why it is called a transition. And it's a transition both for the gender diverse person and everyone else around them,
Right.
right? I loved how Demi Lovato talked about it when they came out as non-binary. And often we'll use the word, they admit they'll sometimes still refer to themselves as a she. And they'll say, like, I used that word for myself for a really long time.
Yes.
I forget sometimes. So
Right.
it's okay if the people around me like are getting used to this new like piece of my identity, and we're all traveling this road together.
Love it. Love it.
Exactly.
So I know we're almost out of time, so I want to make sure that we're really touching base on some of the biggest things. There is support out there in our community, in our schools. There's support. Even teachers, we talk through the PRISM. It's right in our what's the word I'm looking for? Sorry, my brain went.
So PRISM was a document created by the Alberta Teachers Association as a foundational document for us when we're working with.
So we're never speaking about things that would be considered inappropriate for the grade level, age level, and we do not have a hidden agenda. ATA, Alberta Teachers Association, does not. So this was a document meant for us to follow, and it is grade specific to talk about at this grade level what you can do with this child, what books would be appropriate to talk about. These are all things that are a lovely part of the PRISM material, but in our community, aside from Pride YMM and some of them, some of our local ones, we also have like CMHA and some other solutions who have mentors, and they have individuals who are willing to work with the parents, with the children. And anything else that comes to mind that you feel would be important to bring forward in this?
A lot of the stats on things like mental health for queer youth especially aren't actually have nothing to do with being queer. It's not the being queer that makes those stats true. What makes those stats true is the way society and families view queer people.
I really want you to say that again,
Yeah.
please. It's society and the way people
Right.
view it.
So, right, you Melanie mentioned that rates of depression and anxiety are higher amongst queer people.
Yes.
It is not that being queer leads you to
No.
being depressed. It's that the way society treats queer people leads to depression. And so, as we've all been saying, that parents, I always assume parents love their kids and want the best for their kids and want them to have good mental health and physical health and everything else. And so when that's where I assume that's where all parents are coming from.
Right.
When your kid comes out to you, you just need to love them.
Yeah.
You just need to love them and learn, right? Like learn what that means and honor it as a gift that they have given you. Don't tell them it's a phase.
Right.
We never say that to straight kids. Oh, it's just a phase you're going through. You think you're straight. No, we wouldn't, right? And yeah, like it's just sometimes the things we think are normal to say to straight people, and then how we view queer people as being somehow different or vice versa, just sometimes mind-boggling to me. But yeah, just honor that the person is who they are.
Yeah.
Learn what that means, not question them like, are you really, or what does that mean? Or like you
You're
said,
not challenging it.
no, but like you said, lots of kids are, especially teenagers in junior high, oh my God, they're trying to figure out so much about their identities,
Yes.
whether it's their gender or what,
Yes.
their sexuality or what do I want to be when I grow up? What subjects do I like?
Yes.
All of that stuff. And it's a really scary kind of world. Like, what's my fashion sense? So, all of those pieces. And let your kid explore that.
And be okay with it and just walk along with them.
Exactly.
And just as an encouragement to parents, we're all learning and growing. Just to know, I've worked with a lot of different parents, and they're not sure where they were at personally with that part of the journey and how they can support their child. And, that's why there's support for you parents as well, whether it's going to see a counselor for yourself, talking to a friend, the idea of mindset. So to be able to understand how you feel about a situation and also how your child is feeling as well is so important. And, in working with parents, sometimes, as you mentioned there, Kathy, over those upper elementary, junior high years, sometimes there's changes. The students even change how they identify themselves and being in that journey. So just know you're there as a parent to support them, to seek to understand, and it really is relationship first. Even in working in different populations, I've worked in the Catholic school boards for years. One of my associate superintendents I first worked with, she said, well, there was conversations around what could that particular school division that we would be associated with up here, how are they going to manage that as a Catholic school board? And my associate superintendent said, well, what's most important is the person. Let's see that individual for the support they need and who they are and on their journey. And I think that's such an important message for parents to take away. How do I, as a parent, see my child? And if there's one aspect, which is, as you talked about, Kathy, is so important to them that we're journeying with, maybe there's, even as parents and teenagers, some differences and perspectives, there's still actually elements of your lives that are similar. And I think focusing on those commonalities, building those bridges and building those relationships. You might have different perspectives or see certain things differently in the world, whether it be politics and other things too, but we don't make that the main point. We begin connection where it's possible, seek to understand, do our own work as parents, and continue to move from there.
The one thing that gets rid of or eliminates those mental health issues that queer kids face, whether it's depression, anxiety, and then the corresponding things like rates of homelessness, lack of positive future earnings, like all of the negative stats that exist for the queer community, what overcomes those is supportive families.
Supportive families.
So important.
Then queer kids have just the same stats and ability to succeed and have positive lives as straight kids do if they have supportive families.
I think the bottom line is, regardless of how you identify, we all need love and support, and we do better environments where it's fostered.
Love is love. Right? That's what it is.
Absolutely.
No, this was wonderful. Any closing remarks, Joel, that you would like to comment on? Or
I think the biggest thing is just parents, wherever you find yourselves on the journey, reach out, ask for support,
Yeah.
whether to our podcast or those community resources, your own supports. We're here with
Your
you.
school counselors.
We're learning with you. I love what you started with, Kathy. You're learning about yourself through your
Absolutely.
students. And I think we're all on that journey.
Yeah,
So
that's
that
right.
learning journey is so important.
Well, this was fantastic. I loved everything about this podcast. And I think the biggest thing that my takeaway from this is, again, love is love. And we need to accept and seek to understand. What I love the most, Kathy, I have to say, is your authentic way of approaching it. And even though the three of us, we are counselors, there's so much we need to learn. I felt very comfortable with talking to you about all this. So thank you for that. This has been wonderful and learning for me. I've learned a lot as well. The experiences that we have as in these podcasts, we're learning all the time in these podcasts. So if there's any information that you feel you want to relay back to us, or any feedback you have from many of the students you work with, please let us know, because we're always looking for feedback in this podcast as well. So thank you so much for your time today. It's been wonderful having you as a guest.
Thank you very much for having me. It was great to talk about these issues again as a queer person myself, and then on behalf of the queer kids that I work with. The more people who try to understand us, the better the acceptance and the love in the world will be. So thank you.
Well said, because your mental health matters.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Please reach out to us if you have questions or comments about today's topic, or questions or suggestions for future topics. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, we encourage you to reach out to local agencies for support, as our podcast is not a substitute for counseling. If you require immediate support, please contact the crisis line or your local hospital.